Let us start with the preliminary homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Let us now pay respect to the triple gem. Arahang sama sambuddho bhagava buddhang bhagavantang abhivademi. Swakato bhagavata dhammo dhammang namasami. Supatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho sanghang namami. Let us now go for the refuge to the triple gem. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. We will now chant the observance of the 5 precepts. Panatipata veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Adinadana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu micacara veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Musavada veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Surameraya majapamadatana veramani sikapadang samadhiyami. Let us recollect the sublime qualities of the Buddha. Iti piso bhagava arahang sama sambuddho vijacarana sampano sugato lokavidu anuttaro purisa dhammasarati satta dewa manusanang buddho bhagavati. Let us recollect the sublime qualities of Dhamma. Swakato bhagavata dhammo sanditiko akaliko ehipasiko opanayiko pacatang veditabo vinyuhiti. Let us now recollect the sublime qualities of Sangha. Supatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Ujjupatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Nyayapatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Samicipatipano bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Yadidang cattari purisa yugani atta purisa pugala esa bhagavato sāvaka sangho. Ahuneyo pahuneyo dakineyo anjali karaniyo anuttara punyaketa lokasati. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, brothers and sisters, for coming to today's Sunday talk. We are very honored and delighted today to have Mr. Zulhaqem Zulkifli to give us a talk on the applications of Pratītyasamutpada in social work. Now let me give you a short bio. Zulhaqem graduated with a degree in philosophy from Nanyang Technological University of Singapore. He is currently pursuing his master's in Buddhist Studies at the University of Oxford. He is also the co-founder of Project Hills, a charitable initiative that focuses on the provision of essential household items and funds to defray every living expenses for the underprivileged and elderly residents in the rental estates. Thank you, Zul, very much for giving your time and effort to give us a talk. Without further ado, I'm going to pass the time now to Zul.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Zul, and today I'll be talking to you about, a very key central doctrine within Buddhist thought, which is Pratityasamutpada or Pratītyasamutpāda in Pali. And this translates to, codependent origination, interdependent origination. And basically what this whole concept is actually about the cycle of cause and effect that is taught to us by the Buddha when he attained the enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. And this is this doctrine or this concept is actually really, really central to Buddhist thought. And I thought I would share a bit about my thoughts about it. I wouldn't presume to teach you, and some of you may already be much more advanced in your learning and may maybe whatever I'm going to say might seem a bit redundant or not really useful, but nevertheless I think I would encourage you to continue listening, because this particular talk will actually be placing the concept of Pratītyasamutpada within the context of social work, and this social work is partly based on my personal experiences. For those who don't know, I am also a founder of Project Hills. If you don't know what Project Hills is, I will explain to you what we do and what exactly is our mission and aim. And I think there are if you do a quick Google search, you can find a lot of articles on the things that we have done, and hopefully that will give you an understanding of what we do. So yes, and the title of my talk is Cultivating the Dharma I, and that's such a grand title. And I've chosen this term, the Dharma I, because this is a term that emerges from a particular chapter that or story that I'm going to relate to you from the Pali Canon, and hopefully, you will join with me in this journey to learn more about, how we understand certain concepts within Buddhism, and how, more importantly, how do we live these concepts in our everyday lives. And in particular, mention is also to in doing social work, because I think whether or not you are a social worker does not really matter. Most of us try to do a lot of good things in our lives. We try to alleviate the suffering of others, try to donate. If we can't donate money, we donate time. And a lot of times when we engage in this kind of social work, we face certain situations that are quite challenging. I will not lie. Sometimes it's really, really difficult to understand certain situations of why a particular individual or a group of individuals are behaving in such a way. And I hope by the end of this talk, you would possibly see where I'm coming from, and maybe if you could apply in the way you do your interactions with people, I think that will be exceptionally great, and I'll be very, very heartened to hear that. So without further ado, I'll just go on to the first part, which is this particular narrative which you can find in the Vinaya Pitaka of the Pali Canon. So that's one of the three baskets of the Pali Canon, and this is the Pali Canon is usually associated with Theravada Buddhism, but I think most Buddhist traditions also pay close attention to the Pali Canon, because by far this is the most complete and the most oldest Buddhist canon that we have so far. So I think that sort of gives it a kind of authenticity to it, and certainly as what the Buddha says, ehipasiko, you should see for yourself whether the teachings are good or not, and not depend on hearsay. You shouldn't even listen to what I say. I can just tell you so many things, but you should go and find out for yourself, is this really a good teaching or not? So to go back to this topic, so in the Vinaya Pitaka, there's a section called the Mahavagga, and in the Mahavagga there is a chapter called entitled Upatissa Pasine. Upatissa is actually another name for Sariputra, or Sariputra for those who want to know the Sanskrit name. And what it translates to is actually Upatissa's question. So it's the questions of Sariputra. And so I'll just give you a brief summary of what was going on in this chapter. You can go online. There's many translations of it. The particular translation that I've used is actually Thanissaro Bhikku's translation, a very great translator, and you can read that. So what actually happened is two of the future disciples of the Buddha, I mean, these are really big disciples, Sariputra and Moggallana. So they would later on become really ardent disciples of the Buddha and followed him around everywhere. And this actually chronicles to us the story of Sariputra, and what actually happened in his life that led him to Buddhism. And I think I've chosen this story because it's actually one of my favorite stories to think about, mainly because from a doctrinal perspective, it captures the key essence of Buddhist teaching and what the Buddha taught within a short story, essentially. And that has always made me very fascinated with it. I think it's quite timeless. And the story goes that as young children, Sariputra and Moggallana, they were children who were more interested in attaining some kind of enlightenment, trying to escape from the worldly life and trying to attain a spiritual awakening of sorts. And back in those days, and I would imagine in ancient India, this is not something that is very far-fetched. I think today if you go out and you told your friends, hey, I want to renounce the worldly life, I want to attain a liberation, you'll probably be looked at as someone weird. Well, the good news is back then it was also back then is also a bit weird, but it's not so weird in the sense that there were many people who were striving for such a experience. There were, in fact, the Jainas, the Jains, the Brahmins, the different Brahmanical schools, and the different Indian philosophical school of thoughts that propagated and taught a different doctrine or a different way or method to attain this spiritual enlightenment or awakening or escape from the fetters of this world. So as children, I guess you could say Sariputra and Moggallana are actually quite strange. Usually small kids wouldn't really bother about suffering or I want to attain spiritual awakening, but for Sariputra and Moggallana, they are quite unique in that sense. Very, very intellectual, very unique, and they understood. They had some kind of understanding that, well, whatever condition that I see around me now is problematic, and I need to find a way to get out of it. So when they attained a certain age, they started learning a holy life, so leading a holy life under teachers, and they had a particular teacher, Sanjaya, who they were practicing with. So practicing means maybe some form of meditative experience, some kind of austerities, starvation maybe, or a lot of this kind of how to say, deprivation of the body exercises that or certain rigorous disciplines that they engage in just to attain this clarity of mind. And at the point of time, Sariputra and Moggallana were practicing this under Sanjaya. And then one fateful day, one of the first few disciples of the Buddha, so if you recall, when the Buddha attained his enlightenment, the first people that he went back to were his friends from the previous time, who he was practicing austerities with, and at first they rejected him, and Asaji, the venerable Asaji, was one of the people who rejected him at first, and then they saw in him something that they couldn't explain, and they started learning from him, and these ascetics actually became the first few disciples of the Buddha. And one day Sariputra saw Asaji in the marketplace, and I think Asaji was going around asking for alms, and Sariputra, upon seeing the venerable Asaji, became very enamored. So he became very impressed actually, and very attracted to his demeanor, because if you read the story, Asaji was really determined. He exuded a certain kind of aura, a certain kind of calmness that Sariputra had not seen in other gurus or other ascetics, and he started wondering to himself, well, this venerable Asaji, who is this person, and who is this? Surely, if someone who has attained spiritual awakening, it must be this person, because he exhibits all these wondrous qualities that can be seen. And so Sariputra followed Asaji, because he didn't want to interrupt Asaji when he was going around doing his alms collecting. And finally, he met Asaji, and he asked Asaji the question, who are you, and who is your teacher, who has taught you? Have you learned some kind of doctrine, some kind of learning, some kind of teaching that I do not know? And surely, if there's this teaching, then I want to learn it. And the Venerable Asaji humbly replies that I am just a person who has just been initiated upon the path, and I have not been long initiated, so I dare not expound too much on the teachings. But nevertheless, the Venerable Asaji does answer Sariputra. So Sariputra actually asks two questions, but for this lecture, this presentation, I'll just be focusing on the first question, because it is the answer to the first question that is really important, at least within the confines of this lecture. So upon hearing the answer to the first question, which is, what exactly is the teaching that Asaji has learned, Shariputra actually attains the Dharma I, and this is the Dharma I that I have put place as the title of this talk. And he attains the Shotapana status. So Shotapana is the stream entry status, where you basically, to put it simply, you get rid of the basic factors, so the basic things that defilements, or maybe some kind of mental defilements are sort of cleared, and that sort of like allows you or facilitates your process to, it's like the first step in attaining eventual nirvana. And I think so I'll go, and now the question undoubtedly arises, what exactly did Asaji say to Shariputra? So it is this particular phrase, particular verses in Pali and also in Sanskrit. Usually there's no name for it, because as far as I know, there's no name for it, but usually we call it the Yedamma, Hetupava. And it's sometimes it's used as a kind of dharani. So sometimes, historically speaking, if you go to ancient Buddhist sites, like sites in Gandhara, today Gandhara is like this huge massive archaeological dig where we find the early Buddhists, and you can find actually a lot of those vases, or maybe some of these statues of the Buddha. They would have this inscription of the Yedamma on it to sort of like to sort of inaugurate the statue, or to show certain kinds of veneration to these few verses. But actually, these verses also can be found in the Pali Canon. In fact, I think there's no other place that it can be found. It can only be found in the Pali Canon, and it's in this particular story. And the verse is Yedamma hetupabhava tesham hetum tatagato aha tesham yachayo nirodo evam vadi mahasamano. So Ye Dhamma Hetupabhava. So of those phenomena that arise from causes, Hetu, arise from cause, Hetupabhava, Tesham Hetum Tatagato Aha. So those causes has been taught by the Tathagata, and the cessation to Tesham Chayo Nirodo, Evam Vadi Mahashamano, so has been proclaimed by the great ascetic. So you have to pardon my Pali, because I'm actually more I usually recite this in Sanskrit, so I'm more, so sometimes if some of the R's or some of the S's come out in the Pali, is because I keep confusing it in my head, because of habit of tongue. So and what this verse itself is a really beautiful verse. This is what we have here is actually the entirety of Buddhist teaching, condensed into a single saying. of those phenomenon that arises from causes. Those causes have been taught by the Tathagata, the thus gone one, and their cessation too has been proclaimed by the great ascetic Mahashramana. And that is epithet of the Buddha. He is the great Shramanas. There are many Shramanas, but of those Shramanas, the greatest is of course the Buddha, because he's the one who taught us these ideas. And of course, you might be asking me, okay, well, Zul, you say this is a really interesting verse, but where does Pratītyasamutpada come out, or Pratītyasamutpada come up? So it actually comes out because it's not mentioned, but it's implied, and it's implied in the first line of those phenomenon that arise from causes. And this is really, really central to Buddhist doctrine, that everything that is that we see is cause, and everything that is cause has an effect, and it's just an infinite loop of causes and effect that keeps arises over time. Even ourselves, even the Zul now is arising and ceasing at every given moment. So yes, so this is the term in Sanskrit and the term in Pali. So now I'll delve a bit into the term, and this will get a bit complicated, but you'll just bear with me. I have actually chosen to dissect the term in the Sanskrit, because I think, but in terms of understanding it, or why are you doing it in Sanskrit? Why are you not doing it in Pali? Well, because Pali and Sanskrit are sister languages. Pali is the vernacular. Sanskrit is more of like, literary language. But in terms of vocabulary, there's not much difference. In terms of grammar structure, not much difference, although Pali is much, much simpler. And I think I would actually encourage people to learn Pali if it's much, much simpler than Sanskrit. So yeah, so what is in a term? What is this? When we say Pratītyasamutpada, what does it mean? Or Pratītyasamutpada, what does it mean? So it actually consists of two main words, Pratitya and Samutpada. And Pratitya means having depended. So and it comes from if you look at my slide, I've broken up the word. So Prati means to go towards, or to go near, or something near. It doesn't mean literally go, but something towards, something near. And then there's the root word e, which is to go, and the ya suffix, which is at the end, is actually in the absolutive case. So having the absolutive just means well, it just means absolute, like having, it is confirmed, or it has been depended. So together you get this compound term, which is pratitya, so having depended. Samutpada, I have also broken it up. The prefix sam is a really wonderful suffix, because you will see this many times in Buddhist terminology. Not even just Buddhist, even Hindu or Jain terminology. Sam as a prefix is quite a common prefix, and is usually that attached to a word to signify some kind of intensity, some kind of, and the intensity is not just it's not just like an intensifier alone. It's also intensity in the sense of togetherness or completeness. I usually translate as completeness, because I just find it, well, it's just a habit of translation. But that's what sam means as a prefix. And then this word utpada. So ut means to go up, or is indicative of going up. And then pada is actually from the word, the root pad, which means to walk, or to fall, interestingly. So there's this kind of opposites playing, but I think most of the time we take it as in the sense of walking. That's why you have the dhammapada, literally the foot, the walk, or the path, or the walking of the Dhamma. So although I think some translators do say, like, the Buddha's footprints or something. So I think it's not really far off, but you get the meaning. So if you put utpada together, then you get this meaning of coming forth or arising or birth or production. And so if you put them together, you'll get this really interesting compound word, Pratityasamutpada, which is really, really fascinating from a linguistic point of view. And also, it tells us a lot about the complexity of Buddhist ideas, that, it's not just that the ideas are complex, but the words themselves, the individual words that are being used are complex in and of themselves, even though they are presented as easy teachings. Yes, that is true, but it's easy in the sense that to understand, but to truly understand, then there has to be more nuance and more details in how we understand it. So that is all for linguistics. This will be the last time I'll be talking about linguistics in this lecture, because I know it's very dry and some people might not really like it, but well, you decide that for yourself. So I'll just move on. And more importantly, why is this Pratītyasamutpāda so important within Buddhist thought? Well, for the very simple reason, and I've been emphasizing it from the start of this lecture, that this is the central philosophy of what the Buddha taught. There is no doubt that if you could say Buddhism, if someone asks you what is Buddhism in a word, if you ask me, I would say it's Pratītyasamutpāda. It is dependent origination. This is the key philosophy of what the Buddha taught and what he has discovered upon the completion of his meditative process. And usually when we talk about Pratītyasamutpāda, then there is these 12 nidanas that come out. And the 12 nidanas, I think a lot of people, if you are Buddhist, you would definitely know what this is. Avijja, ignorance; sankhara, formation; vijnana, consciousness; nama rupa, mind and body; salayatana, which is the six senses; phasa, sense contact. So that just means like touching. And then vedana, feeling; tanha, craving; upadana, which is attachment; bhava, which is becoming; jati, birth. So from the becoming, you are born. And then jara marana, which is old age and death. And I mean, this 12 nidanas also really important because it tells us how to understand Pratītyasamutpāda, and how do we break it down. So at least within early Buddhist thought and teaching, there was always this tendency to break things up into helpful categories for the sake of understanding the teaching. And you could say, like, even within this 12 categories, there is also an element of past, present, and future. So ignorance and formation, avijja and sankhara, is something that happens in the past. And then things like consciousness, mind and body, six senses, feeling, all the way until bhava, is something that happens in the present time. So it always happens in the present. It's always happening. Even now, as I am talking, it's happening now as it is. And then the future life is of course, birth, jati, and jara marana, old age and death. And it tells us that ultimately all these things, having arisen, they cease, and that is just the nature of this reality. And whomsoever understands this teaching, then you could say they have in a way cultivated the dharma I, and that is exactly what Sariputra and Moggallana actually got after asking Asaji those questions, and Asaji gave them the answer, and he attained the dharma I because he was able to see that things arise and cease, and they are always in this infinite process. So if you reach this far, then I'll just point out the key points that I've been trying to say. So I always like to make things simpler to understand, and sometimes all these terms, they do confuse us. Some people can do it, some people can't, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong if you don't know the terms. Just understand that firstly, everything that exists is caused, and having been caused, they cease. And this is like my favorite phrase, and this is a phrase that I came out myself, because when trying to study Buddhist doctrine, and certainly trying to understand another tradition, sometimes you have to use certain kind of skillful means, if you will, to understand what exactly is being taught. And one more thing that I need to emphasize, and it's really important, is that Pratītyasamutpāda as a process is infinite. It's infinite, and it's simultaneous, and it's fast. You can never point out, it's not humanly possible to point out, well, unless you've become a Buddha, then maybe you can have some powers. But the rest of us who are unenlightened, we can never pinpoint or know when these processes take place, but we know that they take place. And this is verifiable in reality. Everything, if you put your hand in the flames, then your hand burns, and then you feel the pain. I mean, that's quite verifiable. But if that is on an observational scale, and on a microcosmic scale, it's always happening on the level of atoms, on the level of microscopic processes, even within our body. Our body is an entire universe on its own. We don't even know what goes on in there, and I think given the kind of circumstances that we face today, it is really telling of us, of like how inaccessible this is, this knowledge is. But somehow the Buddha has already highlighted these teachings a few thousands of years ago, and that's really, really amazing. And then I think one of the most important points, actually, now I'm gonna go in, is actually this idea of linear viewing and holistic viewing. So usually when we understand Pratītyasamutpada, and this is based on my personal observances of I guess you could say of Buddhist practitioners and lay practitioners, there is this linear viewing of Pratītyasamutpada, which is that something happens, and then it's on a line. A goes to B, and then this becomes C, and then D, and the entire whole work. But actually, it's not so linear. It's actually you should strive to have a holistic viewing, in the sense that it's all over the place. It's just, you should think of it, instead of a line, it's a matrix. So it's always connected to everything that happens around you, is part of the same process. And there may come a point in time where those processes actually intersect, and when they intersect, that is where we have some kind of relationship. And in a sense, it's actually quite beautiful in a way, because if you understand it in this way, you will understand that a lot of the things that we experience in reality, in this phenomenon that we experience in reality, is actually very much intertwined with each other. Even though now I'm in the UK, and Hui Kim is in Singapore. We think we are very far apart. We're very far apart. How can I and Hui Kim not be so connected? But we are. We are, and it takes a certain kind of seeing, a certain kind of viewing, to understand that we are connected. And indeed, now of course we are connected via Zoom, but there is also a kind of relation that's taking place. And there are more often times than not, actually we realize in our everyday lives, there are a lot of instances of events that take place, that where we find ourselves finding people that, you know, whom we never ever thought of, you know, meeting or or knowing, or you know, or things happening to us, actually happening to us. And those things do not happen by chance or something. There is a relationship that is taking place. You know, there's a chance element, but there's also a kind of relationship that has set the path for those relationships to come in. And this is really important to understanding. And you know, if you can understand this, then we uh it we can probably understand life a bit more better. And you know, I'll explain to you how this works, and you know, in the following slides, how I have applied this in doing social work. So, you know, before, you know, I talk a lot. Initially, you know, at the beginning, I was talking about Project Hills and what exactly is this Project Hills that we talk about. And Project Hills is this organization. I wouldn't say organization. It's more of like a collective of people. You know, we started with like 10 volunteers, but the main base of our operations is actually in the poor rental estates in Singapore, where people were struggling. And this actually started with the circuit breaker. During the circuit breaker, there was a lot of people who were really struggling with you know, their lives. And you know, I think this kind of suffering is not bound by tradition or religion or ethnicity. Everyone is suffering. So, and especially, you know, if you consider that within the rental estates, we have one of the most impoverished, and you know, the lowest level of people in terms of financial accessibility, financial wealth. And there were a lot of troubles. So people getting retrenched. There were people struggling to pay their bills, you know, because, you know, you're staying at home, and then, you know, more electricity and water consumption. So bills were high. And, you know, even to put food on the table, you know, I can tell you that some of the houses, and you know, this might seem very strange, but I assure you this is 100% true. Some of the houses that we go knocking at night, you know, there was this one house which had like about 6 children that I went to, and it was around 10 p.m. I knocked the door and I asked them, you know, and it was just nice because that day we were distributing hot meals to the estate, because there was a donor who wanted to give nice hot meals to people, and we were knocking the doors to give. It was already 10 p.m. and all 6 of these children has not eaten, and they have not eaten for the entire day. It goes to, I mean, I have to say that was actually really, you know, I usually think that, you know, doing this kind of social work, I would be very accustomed to all these stories. But when I sort of went there and I saw that situation, I think I was, I know, severely, you know, misjudged the entire situation. And you know, I was very shocked. I mean, after all, this is Singapore, you know. Well, where got food scarcity problem, you know, everyone can get food. But actually, that's not the case. A lot of these cases actually just go undocumented, and you know, people just don't really know. Maybe if you work in a social service agency, you might know. But this depends also on whether these people themselves want to, you know, show themselves. Because some of them, you know, we usually forget that people also have dignity, and sometimes they don't want to ask for help for various reasons, and because of that, they literally suffer in silence. And you know, this is basically what, you know, Project Hills does. And you know, Project Hills, I'm actually really proud to say, if there's something that I'm proud to say about Project Hills, is that as an organization, it is made up of people from various walks of life. So you have, you know, students who are studying Islamic studies, but you also have a Buddhist youth group also helping us out. Some of the temples also help us out. Some church groups also help us out. And, you know, people from all walks of life, basically just young Singaporeans who just want to make a difference and who want to be of help, of assistance to people, banding together and trying to, you know, do the best that they can. And so that is, you know, that is what Project Heals does. And this is really important because, you know, Project Heals is, you know, the work in Project Heals sometimes is, I would say sometimes, but most of the times it's quite challenging because the nature of the interactions, you know, these are some of the people have gone through a lot of suffering, a lot of pain, and, you know, that sort of shapes the way they interact with other people. You know, sometimes it's very suspicious. Oh, why you want to help me? You know, you're trying to get publicity or something. And you know, that's where a lot of communication has to take place and all that. And sometimes you help someone, and I think this is where this particular case is really, really important, is that when you help someone and then that person, you know, instead of, you know, even saying thank you or being grateful, they sort of like maybe abuse you, or, you know, or say certain things that are not really nice, or, you know, or you help them today but then tomorrow they're doing something bad again. And, you know, it's like a cycle that they go through. And sometimes it's really it can be quite frustrating to see this going on, because we are, after all, at the end of the day, human. And, you know, sometimes it's really, really frustrating. And, you know, our human emotions do come out, and we do think that, oh, how come this person, you know, why, you know, I've already helped you, and, you know, I'm trying my best for you, but you still insist on, you know, doing these sorts of self-destructive activities. Why is that the case? And it was in these particular situations that, you know, we were going through as a team, that where I found Pratītyasamutpada really, really helpful in terms of reshaping how I went in, and reshaping how my attitudes towards such situations. So, you know, I mean, I've been talking about this dharma eye, you know, this dharma eye that is you need to cultivate. And sometimes I do tell the volunteers that, you know, you have to cultivate this awareness. So the dharma eye is not, you know, a literal eye. Yes, maybe it can be a literal eye, you know, because you need to see what's going on. The dharma eye is an attitude, you know, it is an understanding that things do not happen in a particular way just because you know, it just happened. You know, sometimes it does, but actually a lot of the, when it comes to, you know, poverty cycles or self-destructive cycles, a lot of these processes are already sort of paved, or are already a result of other factors that have been taking place. And usually when, so for instance, if someone, you know, I see someone doing something, I've helped someone, and the next week I come back and check on him, and then he does something bad, and then, you know, my first instinct usually would be, well, you know, to get angry and maybe, you know, lecture the person, scold the person, which is, you know, honestly speaking, not really helpful, because nobody likes to be scolded, firstly, and secondly, also, we need to respect them as people. You know, we need, as much as we demand, we want respect for ourselves, we need to respect the people that we're interacting with. We are assisting them, we are not saving them, we are not trying to be saviors. We are just assisting them so that they can themselves, you know, try to move forward on their own to a better place. And usually when how this works is, whenever I face this kind of situations, I ask myself, what is exactly the circumstances behind this person coming to this in this present state. You know, what is going on with his life? What is his history? What is her history? Who is going on? And then, you know, how do they find themselves in such a position, and why is this cycle taking place? You know, this is really important, you know, and I think to a certain extent this is also a very key motif in Buddhist thought, the asking of why, and sometimes I in the context of this of the story of Sariputra, I also do sometimes ask myself, am I, emulating Sariputra by asking why? And I would like to think so, I would like to think so. In fact, I think most of the times, the way how the Buddha teaches is through the mode of questioning. Someone asks a question, he answers, and it's a round of just question answer, and that is pretty much the approach that I take when I dealing with these kind of situations. But it has to be not just asking of questions, because that's just very easy. I can just ask questions. Anyone can ask questions, but the asking of these questions has to be grounded in a sense of compassion, in a sense of understanding. So compassion and understanding is really, really important in when you try to ask these questions of these people. Um, at the end of the day, what you want to do is actually try to get at the root causes of this situation. So and most of the times, trying to blame these people for their circumstances is a very easy way out. Anyone can do that. You can blame. Blaming is very easy, and is easy, and it's also, I would say a very lazy way of doing things. To some extent, maybe someone is blameworthy of certain acts, but if you are attached to the idea of blaming that person, then I think that becomes a bit problematic, because that person has already ceased to be that person at that point of time where you see them. They've already done the act, so that person that done the act is already done. It's already gone. There's a new person in front of you, and blaming this new person just seems a bit strange. Why would you blame this person? It's a new person. And that is how I try to see how people behave. When I see people behave in a certain way, I'll just tell myself, well, okay, yes, they did something bad, but they are no longer here. They've already gone. This is a new person, so I must start afresh with them. And also because blaming a person, people is not, blame culture is just not really compassionate. I mean, it if anything is quite counterproductive. You make people feel more isolated, and when what you're trying to do really is trying to help, and more importantly is trying to understand what is best for this person in this point of time. um Suppose I am dealing with an alcoholic. This person, he or she drinks a lot, and and they don't have money, and then I give them money to sort of, because they say they need the money to subsist certain living costs. But then I find out later on, well, they actually use the money to buy more alcohol and drink, and obviously that makes anyone angry. Like, oh, there's a betrayal of trust. I've given this person money, and um how can they do this to me? But then you ask, that's where you need to stop yourself. And I usually stop myself. Well, is that really me? Is that really my money? And who is this I that who is this person that has been betrayed? Is it really me, or is it a me in the past? And if it's a me in the past, then why would I be offended? If anything, it would be quite problematic to view it in that way. And that's how I understand this thing. But what we should be more concerned about is actually, why is this person behaving this way? Uh, Trying to get to know the history of this person. Well, maybe um, he's drinking because he doesn't have a job, and he's been rejected by many places, and then you find out that actually the reason why he's drinking is not because of not just not having the job, but also because he feels like he's a failure, and he's disappointed in himself that he cannot provide for his children, and alcohol is something that is that helps him cope with it. It is obviously I'm not condoning the drinking. That's not really the point. The point is, behind this drinking there are reasons, and these reasons have caused the manifestation of these unwholesome activities, and that is where we should be directing our focus. And from there you can sort of understand, okay, what this person needs actually is not monetary help or a scolding or a lecture. What he needs is actually a job. And that's where that's like the best step that you can take. That's the best step moving forward, identifying the root causes and trying to trying to create a cessation of those root causes. And if you can get rid of the root causes, then you can address the other issues that have appeared later on in this chain of Pratītyasamutpada accordingly. And that makes it a much more fruitful endeavor, as opposed to getting angry with someone because they're always stuck in this process. And if you think about it, it's not only just, it's quite universal in application. It's not just social work. Sometimes I guess if you go to work and then you get angry at someone, or even with family members. I mean family members sometimes also, we love them, but they do test our patience. And sometimes you need to take a step back and ask yourself, is it really, oh, okay, why is this person angry? Maybe they had a bad day at work, and their boss scolded them, and then what is, and more importantly, what is the best way I can cope with this kind of attitude that I'm facing? And you'll find that maybe the best thing for me to do is to keep quiet. Maybe this person is just letting off steam, and later on they would maybe feel better about it. And because if you were to engage, then it will be a never-ending cycle, and then you in a way you create more unwholesome activity, and then the cycle goes on. So and it also, this is also why Pratītyasamutpada is so important, because if you remember the answer that Venerable Asaji told Sariputra, that these causes, they have an end, and the Buddha has taught us that there is a cessation, and this cessation will lead you to a kind of a liberated attitude. I wouldn't say liberation, but a liberated attitude in life, and that's really important, because not only does it help you to alleviate the immediate situations that are presented to you, because most of us go through life not expecting what was going to happen to us the next hour or the next second. We just go through life, and most of the times when we go through life, a lot of these situations just happen to us. We don't expect it to, we don't know that this is going to happen. It just happens. But if you have this kind of liberated attitude, this attitude of having cultivated the Dharma I would argue that you have actually successfully inculcated an adaptability within yourself. You are a very adaptable person, and that is what a feature of this Pratītyasamutpada. And it's not just an alleviation of the immediate things that you see, but also it helps to cancel out future paths to potential suffering. There are times, maybe sometimes you are tempted to say something mean to someone, but because you understand that this is not really helpful and it will lead you to some kind of problem in future, maybe in future you need a help from that person, you stop yourself. Firstly, mainly because it's not really a good thing to do. Secondly, it will just lead to unwanted consequences. And thirdly, because it's just not a nice thing to do. So so it addresses the immediate concern and also the future concern. So anyone who is able to do this is I would say a very successful person. And it goes to show how universal Buddhist teachings can be. Even I don't know who my audience are. I assume most of you are Buddhist, or subscribing to Buddhism or whatever that means, because I honestly don't think you have to call yourself a Buddhist to be Buddhist. That is my personal opinion. I think the term Buddhism is a modern construction. Certainly in the Buddha's time, it wasn't called Buddhism. It was called Buddhism by the rival schools maybe, but most of the time it's just some kind of teaching. It's more of teachings. But if there are non-Buddhists who are watching this also, listening to me, I think I also would like to highlight, it's not like a very, how to say, for lack of a better word, a kind of religious doctrine. It's really universalizable. It's really, something that works. And if it works, then, I don't think attaching certain categories or what is proper and what is not proper is really helpful. In fact, you should be asking yourself what is most beneficial, what is most helpful for you in trying to go through life. And certainly in doing social work, as I've said before, sometimes you don't have to be a social worker to be doing social work. Most of us try to cultivate good habits by helping others. And sometimes there are instances where that arise that are not really conducive or makes us question. And what my talk, the second half onwards, is really trying to drive home at is this idea that it is you should try to cultivate a kind of awareness and a kind of mindfulness actually of Pratītyasamutpada. Not just mindfulness, but mindfulness of how Pratītyasamutpada is always taking place around us. It's to say that you understand a concept is one thing, to be truly aware of a concept is another thing, and then to manifest that concept in actual living experience is the hardest. It's probably the hardest thing of all. And that's why I think there are people who really dedicate their lives to the attainment of this kind of awareness. And I think all of us can learn a lot from this. So without further ado, thank you for listening, and I hope that was beneficial. If you have any questions, you can just ask me. You can ask Hui Kim or and anyone from the Buddhist Fellowship for my contact. I'll be more than happy to answer questions. And also, even if you have comments, please feel free to let me know. So thank you so much. Thank you for listening and for having me.
Thank you, Zul. That was really fantastic. I really love the idea of Pratītyasamutpada from an academic viewpoint. That was fantastic. Can I just ask one question? You
Yes.
said that this process is infinite. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this?
Yes. So when I say that this process is infinite, what I mean is that it is always taking place. And this is the part of the process of of how samsara works also. Samsara as a principle, as a concept, samsara literally just means a cycle. And how the cycle works is because there's this principle of Pratītyasamutpada. So there's samsara, and then there's Pratītyasamutpada that's taking place, that runs the entirety of samsara. And that is why the Buddha tried to tried to, and even the disciples of the Buddha tried to put a stop to these cycles. It's not. I think there's a misconception. Usually, people think that it's like, oh, it's a to put a to liberate yourself from this cycle, but actually it's more of trying to create conditions whereby the cycles are calmed down. They are no longer arising, and that is, in a certain sense, the real a much more accurate way of understanding liberation, at least within Buddhist thought. And it is infinite because it's always taking place, and it's infinite in the sense that it's not only happening on a macrocosmic level, but also on a microcosmic level. It's happening in the present, but it's also extending. It's already extending towards to the future, and whatever that is in the present has already been decided in the past. In Buddhist literature, we call this the you get the phala. So phalam is the fruit of your actions, and and that's where karma comes in, and all these actions generate certain karmic how to say certain types of karma, and it could be good karma, it could be bad karma, but the way to understand that is that things happen because they are conditioned by things. And I don't want to sound so redundant, but sometimes the most simplest things in the world are actually the most difficult things to truly understand, and that's really what I'm trying to go at.
Thank you, Zul. Actually, I was thinking of from the perspective of we can end this cycle of Pratītyasamutpada when hopefully when we become Buddhas, we can end this cycle for rebirth. So I was thinking that perhaps it's not infinite. So I was coming from that angle.
Yeah. So that, I mean, I should have provided a disclaimer. So it's my definition or the context of Pratītyasamutpada that I'm dealing with is mainly dealing with present experiences, not the end soteriological concern. I think that aspect can be another topic on its own, because it's also a very big topic within the study of Buddhism. So but within the confines of this talk, it's mainly practical aspects. Whether you become a Buddha or not is not, it's something not certain yet. And if it does happen, it will probably take quite some time for you to arrive.
Yes.
So I don't think I want to talk much about that, because I really don't know. Sure. I don't know. I have not gone through that process, and I don't think I have any reason to be talking about it. But I'm more concerned about how to see it how to really extract the teachings of the Buddha and apply it to our daily lives. And I think that's really, really useful, regardless of whether you're Buddhist, you're non-Buddhist, you're monastic or a lay person. That it's always useful.
I think that's beautiful. I think that's beautiful. That is practical, is universal, and please forgive me for that question. So yes, I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you that it's an ongoing process, and definitely for me it's going to be kalpas. Zul, forgive me if I just ask another academic question. So sorry, just one question. I understand that in Pratītyasamutpada, it is always in the classical understanding is that it's in 3 lives: past, present, and future.
Yes.
But some people have said that it's also moment to moment.
Yes.
Which is, I think also you alluded to it, because it's our conditioning in this life, our thought moments churning on and on, our karma in this a moment churning on and on. So is the current thinking more 3 lives or moment to moment?
So I'm more thinking of moment to moment.
Right.
But the initial part where I was talking about the 12 nidanas and the past, present, and future, that was just more of like an introductory kind of thing. So I guess like maybe um don't pay too much attention to that. I'm more of talking about momentary processes, and also this past, the concept of time within Buddhist tradition is also a very complicated concept.
Yes. Yes.
I myself wouldn't say that I know much about it, but I have studied it. It is different schools of thought have different understandings of time. Some say there's time, some say there's no time, some, and I don't want to risk being too philosophical, because this is some of these schools are actually the earlier schools of Buddhism. So very early schools like the Sarvastivadins and the or even even not so early schools like the Madhyamaka school probably doesn't think that there is such a thing as time. um and yeah, I think that is to get back to your question, it's more of like in the momentary sense, and it's in that moment. It's this whole idea that within a single moment there's an infinity within a single moment. Not just a moment to moment, but within the single moment there's already an infinity that's within it, and that's to me really complex and really beautiful, actually. That how usually when I think about it, how did this man sit under a tree and come out with this, how did he know this? It's really, really amazing. And over time you have all these great Buddhist thinkers who develop and refine the ideas even further, giving us commentaries and different ways of understanding it. And it's just a very rich world. Yeah. Please stop me if I'm talking too long, because once I start talking about Buddhism, I just never stop. And that's my problem.
Oh, no, we're fine with that. We're fine with that, Zoo. It's very interesting. So maybe a question that I think many of our listeners will be very interested is how did you get to know about Buddhism?
How? Well, this is a very long story, actually. But well, so if you ask me 10 years ago, hey Zul, you're gonna in future you're gonna learn Buddhism, I would probably laugh, because I was not the least interested in Buddhism. I mean, I was studying a lot of religions back then, because I've always been interested in religions. More important, I've always been interested in the question of why do people believe in the things that they believe. And part of this attitude is also sort of like shaped by my family, and who are always very supportive in of me asking critical questions. In I don't think most families, at least within my society, would encourage critical questioning, but my family did. And I've always been interested, because I went to school and I saw a friend, and then he prays to the elephant god Ganesha. And I remember going back to my dad and asking, like, Pa, why our friend, my friend, worship the god elephant head one? Then where? And then I asked, then where is my god? Why I cannot see the why I cannot see the god? Because for at least Abrahamic traditions, especially maybe Islam and Judaism, there's no iconography, there's no images. I think it's quite different for Christianity, but the way we understand God is that you can't see him, but he's around. And then, like, one of my friends, and I was disturbed because one of my friends said, yeah, you worshipping the wall lah. That's why you pray to no image. That's why you don't know what you're praying to. Then I'm like, okay, that's quite interesting. I didn't think about it in that way. So I asked my dad, and my dad was like, well, because like our God has no image. But then I wasn't really satisfied with that answer. So and that's pretty much how I started doing this search for researching on religions, reading books. Some of the books are good, some of the books are really terrible, I think, by not credible writers, and I didn't know better, so I started learning, and growing up, I come from a family that's not really affluent. So I come from a low income background, and I one of the first few instances of my contact with Buddhism was actually when a group of monks actually visited my house back then. So a group of these monks, so we were receiving I some kind of financial help from one of the temples, and so they called up my family and said like, oh, can we send some of our monks over, and they want to talk to you and ask you about your situation and all that, and so we thought, well, oh, okay, that's, I mean, they're just monks, what are they gonna do? So so they came, and and I was, when I first saw that, I was quite scared, like, wow, why are they wearing this strange attire, and then they don't have hair, and as a young boy, you always have these kind of questions, and yeah, why he ask so many, why they, like, always smiling, and what's so funny, I was like always asking this question, and then like yeah, and they ask us like what we need, and how are we feeling, is everything okay. And I think it was my mother who was entertaining them, and she asked me to put away. So at that point in time, we were keeping fish, and then we had like a bottle of fish food around the table, and then she asked me to put it away, and I asked her why must put away. And then, well, the fish food is made out of what, flakes of dead animals. Later the monks breathe in, and then later they break their vow or whatever. We don't want to be responsible for that. We need to respect them. It's not really respectful. I was like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. I was like, oh, they're vegetarian now. Okay, interesting. So that was really my first instance of and it's quite interesting also, because now that I think about it, I didn't even have these were monks are actually the first religious people to come visit my house, so to visit my family. Even being Muslims, we didn't have, you would think that would have a ustaz or a Muslim religious teacher would have entered our house, but actually no. The first group of people to enter, religious group to enter our house, is actually monks, and I've always found that quite fascinating. And sometimes I do wonder, is this the reason why I've been led to study Buddhism? But after the episode, I kind of like forgot about it. I didn't think much about it, because I just thought like, well, it's just a passing thing, and nothing much will happen. And then I entered university. And I did a subject that was caused a lot of which raises a lot of questions during Hari Raya, which is philosophy. Like, oh, why are you doing philosophy? What can you earn doing philosophy? Philosophy gonna feed you what? Yeah. And then my dad was like, just let my son learn whatever he wants. And when I was doing philosophy, I was very interested in big questions. Why part of the reason why I was doing it also because mainly because of religion, and also because I wanted to know, why do people believe in the things that they believe. And there's always this problem of suffering that that keeps cropping up. Like, how do we make sense of this suffering, and how do different philosophers understand suffering, and how do we get out of it? And I think in my second year, we had a visiting Buddhist scholar who taught us Buddhist philosophy. So he taught us some of the Chinese traditions, so Chan Buddhism and Zen in the Japanese tradition, and also Huayan and Tiantai Buddhism. And that's where I think I started getting interested, because the ideas that were presented to me, and of course it was a Chinese Buddhism class essentially, but even Chinese Buddhism cannot escape from the Indian elements, and all these references to India and Indian ideas also fascinated me very much. Like, well, I was thinking, what is all this? It felt like an entire new world was being presented to me, and it was very and part of the reason why I was so interested also because the ideas were very counterintuitive to me. Being brought up in an Abrahamic faith, you are taught that there is a soul, there is a self, and then Buddhism comes and says, well, there's no self. How do you then like it can be like things like even when it comes to iconography, in Islam, depicting images of God is not allowed. But then like you go to the Buddhists and then you ask them like, oh, do you worship this statue of the Buddha? Then they will say yes and no. So I'm always confused. Well, yes, but also no. We know it's a statue, so we are not worshipping the statue. When we bow to the Buddha, we bow to an ideal, and it's supposed to what is more important is the internal process, not the whatever's in front of you. Then I've always had this kind of conversations with my friends. So you can imagine, back then as it is now, I'm always the odd one out in my class. So back then, in the Buddhist philosophy class, I was always the non-Buddhist, and I was always asking my Buddhist friend, hey, you worship this statue, is it? And then after that, they were like, well, no, not really. I mean, we what's more important is actually the process, not really the statue. And so I started asking, so is it possible to pray to the Buddha without a statue of the Buddha? Then they will say, yeah, why not? In fact, and then some of them were saying like, well, I think it's also possible to be Buddhist without being without calling yourself Buddhist. It's possible to pay homage to the Buddha without even exactly paying homage to the Buddha. A lot of these things actually it's just to help ourselves. It's not really, there's no hard and fast rules about how we practice. And then I sort of got introduced into this whole complexity of how different Buddhists understand their teachings and all that. And that's when I started thinking, wow, there's so much I don't know about this tradition. And I mean, I got fascinated because like mainly because I didn't think I would be fascinated by it. It was just very strange, and I had so many questions on doctrine, so many questions of, oh, what exactly did the Buddha say? How do we understand these concepts? Do I have to learn the language and all that? And that's why I thought, okay, maybe I need to go deeper. And much of my educational experience, my attitudes towards education is actually just shaped by my insatiable curiosity and my thirst of wanting to know more. I actually entered my studies not thinking that, well, I want to find a job and all that. And I mean, I did know that this, finding a job is really important, but I also had a lot of these big questions going on at the back of my head. And I thought, why not just take a plunge, just go into Buddhism for real and see what is there for me to see, and just see for myself, ehi pasiko, what exactly is being taught. And and I can tell you now, coming towards the end of my studies, I still don't know a lot of things. Every time I feel like I know something, I will read something else and I will realize that, oh my god, there's just something more. I thought I know, but I really don't know. So a lot of the things that come out from my mouth, I usually qualify it and say that this is not this is my opinion, and there are other opinions out there, and my opinions are subject to corrections. So if you feel that I am not saying something correct, then just let me know, and we can have a good talk about it, or debate or whatever. I'm always, yeah, and that's the story of how I got into Buddhism, I think. Yeah.
Thank you, Zul. Yeah, I totally appreciate that. That's a fantastic answer. And I certainly in my heart, totally agree with you about Pasiko and being open-minded. And definitely I'm going to learn from you to be stronger in that aspect. Thank you, Zul, so much.
Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if you have time for one last question.
Yeah, I always I do have time. No worries.
Oh, okay, great. I read from your Facebook that you managed to help a gentleman talk Adi, I believe, in the cemetery. So my question is,
Yeah.
how on earth did you guys find him in the cemetery? That was wonderful work, and I enjoyed the video so much. Maybe you can tell the listeners something about that. How did you find him?
Right. So for Project Hills, because it's a ground out initiative, right? So I mean, it's in the name, it's ground up. So a lot of our information is through informal channels. And
Right,
a lot of the information, so it's information that I would argue even government agencies won't get. No
right,
matter how much resources you have as a government agency, you will never get the kind of information that we get. For instance, we can get calls from someone saying like, hey, so and so is crying inside their house. What, if you go to a social service agency, I don't think they can even get that kind of information. But at Project Hills, the phones, and my sister actually manages the phone. It's always ringing. And like, hey, so and so is depressed and she's crying in her house, or so and so has no, there's no more diapers for her baby, and she's struggling, and diapers are quite expensive actually. I didn't know that, but I found out,
yes,
and I think that's good to know. Good to know, for future references. But diapers and milk powder is very expensive, and I've been really exposed to this entire culture of purchasing them. Yeah, and it's, a lot of this information actually just comes to us in a very organic way. It's not forced. In the sense that I don't call you and demand you for information. Is people call us and say like, hey, can you help so and so, something has happened to them and blah blah blah, and we'll say, okay, can we get the details of the unit, what's going on, maybe can you be present to bridge us with the residents. And that is actually how we got to know about Tok Adi. Some of the people called us up and said like, I need help. There is a man that I know who works with me, and he and his family have been staying in the grave for in the jungle beside Lim Chu Kang cemetery, um which is really the cemetery actually, the jungle in the cemetery, for the past 3 years. And I was wondering like, are you sure? This is really absurd. Like, what's going on? And then I mean, I didn't believe until some videos and pictures were sent to me, and I was like, oh my god, this is really happening here in Singapore. And so we went down, and it was quite difficult also, because at that point of time it was still um it was one of those DOSCON phases, and you can't have many people around, and we had to keep the limits of the people that were around us. And then we went down there, and we were terribly shocked that well, firstly, obviously, because of the cognitive dissonance, this is Singapore. We pride ourselves on being so affluent, so rich. People have a house, and here is a person who's staying in the jungle in a, if you see the pictures, it's basically a shack. A shack that he put up together with scrap materials. And that's, if anything, is both sad but also really impressive that this person actually can build a house out of nothing. You ask me to build a house right now in the jungle, I will tell you I don't know how to build a house. But there's this person who knows how to build a house. And I thought to myself, wow, I don't think this person is a lazy person, or because I think the common and very irresponsible narrative is that, well, people are poor because they are lazy or they're irresponsible.
indeed,
Well,
yes.
then I was thinking to myself, what sort of irresponsible person would build this? What sort of lazy person would build this? If anything, he's very hardworking. And it's amazing because he made his own generator to generate power. He dug his own well. and no, he found like a source of clean water for him and his family to bathe in. And when we found them, it was really out of, he actually didn't want people to know. How we got to know was when he started asking for help, because the night before a cobra had actually entered their house, and he said like they cannot, he had to put his pride aside, because sometimes we forget that people have dignity, and he had to put his pride aside and said that I cannot let my child, I cannot bear the thought of my child or my wife being bitten by a cobra. And basically they spent the entire night not sleeping until the next day, and we saw them, and they said like, well, there was a cobra, and we didn't know what to do. We tried to chase it away, and the cobra actually killed, I think, some of his chickens. So he had some chickens, and and I was, uh, I mean, I was just struggling so much to take in, so much, of the things. And when you look at the faces of this Tok Adi and his family, you know in the instance that um, it is unquestionable that they've gone through a lot. They've really gone through a lot. You can see it on their faces that they've been through a lot. And and so we started campaigning for them, and going to HDB to ask like, hey, can I, look, there's a guy staying here, and can we get a place, a rental unit maybe for him, and not just that, also to, speaking of Pratītyasamutpāda, also to of future plans for them, because the child is not a Singapore citizen, so his wife is Indonesian, so he's Singaporean. Child is not has not been in school so the child is illiterate. So we had to, I was thinking like, okay, we need to try to, create the conditions for them to break out of this cycle. We need to not just ensure that they get a house and everything is, cared for them, but how to improve their lives going on from here. So we're trying to get them, the child, to be a Singaporean citizen, so that he can, or at least a PR, so he can get, a Singaporean education. And I think education is really, really important. Coming from such a background myself, I really believe that education is the one way that you can level you can break out of a cycle of this kind of suffering. And that's how we found them, and we helped them in that way. And yeah, and now I'm actually quite happy to say that things have stabilized for them. They have a house, and of course, a very great thank you to all the different people who have stepped up to contribute and to help. And I'm actually really amazed, because people, Singaporeans from all walks of lives, regardless of religion, regardless of ethnicity, stepped up and started calling me, and started giving us help in whatever ways that they can. And we really did need a lot of help for him, because we are literally starting with zero with for him and his family. And that's how the Tok Adi case was conducted. And I guess it got quite a lot of attention, and it also, I think, um, tells us not to be complacent, that there are things. And from my last conversation with Tok Adi, he did say there are actually more people of that in his position in the graveyards. And it's just that we haven't really got round because of the whole COVID situation. But I am actually hoping to one day go survey and look at who are all these people, because if there's one person in the jungle staying like that, I think it wouldn't be such a far off thing to say there could possibly be others who are also facing the same situation. And I think that's something that we as a Project Heals, as an organization, can actually do or help out in that way.
Wow, Zul, that's a fantastic story, and thank you so much for helping the community.
Yeah.
I really feel you really put Sila into action.
Oh, this is I think it's much more indicative of your generosity than it is of any kind of sila on my part. I am just trying to I just I'm just trying to see a better world, you know, and that's all really I want to see. And if wherever there is you know, opportunity to remove unnecessary forms of suffering, then I think we should you know be there, and we should, you know, after all, uh what our religions teach us is completely different with how we actually live the teachings of our traditions, you know, what the Buddha taught, what
Mm.
Islam teaches me, you know, all these teachings, they do not they are not meant for just for an understanding. They are also meant for us to really live those teachings, and in that way I think we can, you know, uh, create a better society.
Wow, sadhu to that. And again, I'm just so it's so refreshing that I can throw Pali terms and you understand. It's fantastic. Sadhu, Zul, that was fantastic answer.
Thank you.
So I suppose one last word maybe for our listeners. Any last words for them? Maybe on how to go about learning Buddhism, or how to go about applying it in our lives, or maybe any last words that you would like to tell our audience.
Well, I guess um what I would say is be more open-minded, you know. I think that is something that I've always tried to strive for, and you know, I've always tried to exemplify in my everyday actions, and you know, um I think it's really, really important for us to be really open-minded as a society. And sometimes, you know, being open-minded doesn't mean that you sort of uh you will always get something nice in return. You know, sometimes you being open-minded also means putting yourself in very difficult situations, or in situations where you're not comfortable, and but those sorts of experiences are actually learning points, because it tells you more about yourself than it does about others. And I can tell you that, you know, um all this you know, I guess I am a person who straddles on two paths. On one hand, you know, I straddle on the path of Islam, and then on the other hand, I'm also straddling on the path of Buddhism. And I can tell you that it is possible to do this kind of this to have this kind of complexity is possible. And more often than not, this kind of, you know, being open and being open to experiencing things that are not comfortable to you uh actually is really good for you, because it makes you understand more about yourself, and also understand more about others. And I really believe that through understanding others, actually we actually understand ourselves more. um and every day is a learning journey for me. And that, and also always be kind and compassionate to others, you know. Don't try to always have a compassionate frame of mind when viewing things, you know. Sometimes what is right is not always what is compassionate, you know. And I think I've learned that a lot. Sometimes what is right may not be what is compassionate. And you just have to go through it. And I can't teach you how you are going to have to go through it. It's something you have to experience yourself, and it's something I think life will teach you along the way. But I think if you always take active effort to be a compassionate person, then I think, you know, there's not much problem. And I think that's all I have to say.
I think that's really fantastic. Yeah, because that's really, I mean, that is really the first part of the Noble Eightfold Pathway, right? right view is to have compassion, and that is also the default mind state of an arhat. So Zul, I totally agree with you. Fantastic. And also,
Thank you so much.
yes, in Buddhism also, the Buddha always say, never be afraid of fear and negative thoughts. So on this last note, Zul, thank you so much. We are really honored and delighted to have you. And may we wish you all the success in your studies. Be safe. When you come back to Singapore, please come to the Buddhist Fellowship. You're welcome anytime.
Of course.
Thank you so
I'm
much.
looking forward to it.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Zul. Thank you very much. Thank you, Zul, for a very interesting talk. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We hope to see all of you again for another inspiring talk next Sunday. Thank you and stay safe.
We will now invite all the sentient beings to participate in our acquired merits for cultivating the wholesome thoughts, wholesome speech, and wholesome actions this morning. Let us now chant together. Etawata ca amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe dewa anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etawata ca amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe bhuta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. Etawata ca amhehi sambatang punya sampadang sabbe satta anumodantu sabba sampati siddhya. The dedication of merits to our departed relatives. Let us chant together. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.